Okay, we're back, and this is where we're going to start stripping the table. I'm going to start with the tabletop primarily because it's going to be the easiest to see, and it's also the easiest for me to be able to operate in terms of using the tools that I'm showing you right now. The things that you're going to need for this are as follows. One is you're going to want a flat surface. I've got a old folding table. It's nice and solid, doesn't have to be spectacularly solid because you're not going to be muscling the thing, but you don't want it to be something that's flimsy and is going to tip over because you're working with a lot of stuff that if it goes bad, you don't want it spilling all over stuff. This is Jasco. This is what I was telling you about. This is called paint and epoxy remover. It says 15 minutes. It does not take 15 minutes to set. As a matter of fact, in most cases, you're going to be able to spread and just literally watch it work. The reason why you want to use this first, even though I was never a huge fan of chemicals because in a lot of cases they wet the wood, but I found this, and it's a gel, so it doesn't seep in as much. It eats what it needs to eat, and then it gets out of your way. But the other thing is that it will dramatically reduce the amount of discs you're going to need to do the sanding, because once you start working on something that hasn't been stripped, if it hasn't been chemically stripped, what tends to happen is the heat from the friction melts some of the varnish, it'll melt some of the top coat, and it'll stick it to your disc. And when it does that, you get these little flecks. They look like birthmarks that get stuck on there. And two things happen. One is the disc starts to fail on you, so it stops being effective. And the second thing that it does is it starts cutting little whorls in the wood because it's not sanding, it's literally just cutting little spots in there. So you'll notice that there are these little things that look like the old-fashioned phone cords, like that you used to have for like the dial phones, and like stretch out. It's what it looks like. It looks like these little dial patterns in there. So you're gonna want some Jasco. Because you're using Jasco, it's not as toxic as it once was. They say non-methyl methylene chloride formula. I'll be honest with you, the methyl chloride stuff was amazing. It was fantastic. I mean, this stuff would eat through anything. Of course, it made you go nuts and want to kill things. So apparently they stopped using that and making that. That being said, you'll just end up using more of this. It's still good. It's still what I use every time that I do stripping of furniture, and I've not been unhappy since. But because you are using something that's got a real chemical eating process, there are two things that you're going to want. One is you're going to want some good thick rubber gloves. You can kind of see these are like chemistry gloves. I'm not talking about those ones that they use at the hospital. I'm talking like good thick, very chemically resistant. These have a nice cloth lining to them. Some people like the ones that are lined, that have a lot of fur in them. I don't, because you're going to get hot, you're going to get sweaty, stuff's going to get in there, it's going to get nasty, and you're going to feel like you're putting your hand into a dead rabbit or something. So you want to hang on and use just these regular kinds of guys. You can pick these up pretty much at any kind of like Home Depot, Menards, anything you got out there that's, think like farming equipment meets home care and improvement kind of stuff. You can get that. The other thing that you're going to need to hold this is you're going to need something like a ramekin. These are little glass. This one's called a glass bake. I picked this up at an estate sale for like 10 cents. I have a bunch of these because they're glass. This won't affect them. It also doesn't alter the chemical composition. If you use the metal tins, like the tuna tins and stuff that I was showing you before, you run into all sorts of problems with them. It eats away at some of the coating on the inside. It's not good. Plus, you can never really reuse them. These are great because you can like literally let the stuff get all hard and then just wipe it out once you're done. Get a paper cloth or something like that and just wipe it all out. So this one I've used a bunch of times and it's still really good. So you're going to want glass. Preferably, again, something like this glass bake, little ramekin, and you don't want it too big and you don't want it too deep because you want to be able to hold it if you need to, and with these big gloves you're going to have trouble holding on to stuff. The other thing is that you don't want it too deep because you don't want to have to keep going in there and pulling out. That's when spatter happens, and that's when you're going to get yourself kind of stuff all over the place. So those guys are important. To put the stuff on, you're gonna want chip brushes. These are very simple. I picked up a 24 pack for like 10 bucks. I like the 2-inch models. They're cheap. You can throw them away. The wood is pretty much just cheap kind of pine wood. The brush itself, pretty, kind of just decent enough to get the stuff on there. You're not really painting anything, you're just applying it, but you need the bristles to be able to get into some of those hard to reach areas and dig a little deeper in there when need be. The other thing is that you want to be able to just chuck these things. I know people who spend $8 to $20 on brushes for projects, and it's a complete waste of money. You want to buy a nice bag of pretty much cruddy brushes, and you want to be able to get rid of them when you're done. When you're actually getting into the stripping, this is that kind of 5-in-1 tool that I talked about. This little pointer guy is really great for kind of getting into this groove when I'm getting in there and kind of picking stuff out as I need to. The flat blade is very nice. It's a firm. You'll notice it doesn't bend, which is good because you don't want this thing flicking stuff at you. You just want something that you can press down and ride across that piece of furniture so that it picks up all the stuff. Speaking of picking up stuff, this is where cloths really come in handy. Seriously, if you've got a Goodwill that ever has like a bag sale or something, go get a bag and stuff it full of t-shirts. I mean, yeah, I really wish this one weren't stained because it's the Avengers and it's kind of cool. But, I've got a whole truckload of these things. These are important for a couple of different phases of this thing, but at the very first, what I like to do is I like to have this cloth available and then be able to scrape, and if I need to, I can kind of pick that stuff up. I often will have like a box lid or something where I can kind of flick stuff. Sometimes I'll have a big can, like an old lard can or something. I just scrape it off, but you're gonna get guck on this thing, and it's gonna be something that you wanna try to deal with without having too much of it laying around. That being said, you'll notice that I put a sheet. This is like a twin bed sheet that's just an old one that I picked up again, rummage sale. It protects the table, even though the table really doesn't need protecting from the material. What you're really doing is you're keeping that base clean so that when you do go into sand and things like that, none of the Jasco and the guck gets back on the wood. So what you're literally doing is it's kind of like at those restaurants where they put the big piece of paper down and everybody eats and then they pull the big piece of paper off and rip it off and put a new piece of paper down, and that way they don't have to clean the tablecloth all that much. Same basic premise here. So a lot of t-shirts if you can get them, or at the very least get yourself like a box lid. If you got a beer case or something like that that you don't mind taking and just kind of scraping, you scrape the guck up and you kind of flick it into there, that's good. Also, if stuff's still kind of gooey, sometimes I'll like to take and just wipe it off just to get the extra stuff that I can't scrape off out of here. These are also good. These are those pads that I showed you online. These are perfect. These are gray. I'm a big fan of the gray ones. They're a lot more flexible. They pick up the stuff, and again, you can get in there and kind of scrape that stuff out. Plus, it's really good on edges when you get in there with the Jasco. So let's pour and paint and see what happens. I'll stop this here, and then we'll do the first layer of this stuff, and we'll see how it goes. Okay.